You don't get it. Trust is the same thing as reliance. It's a fault of cowards. I have no need for such weakness. I have many subordinates, many who've pledged themselves to me, but I've never asked for any of their trust. Yes, I've asked for their allegiance, but faith is another matter altogether.
First of all, I couldn't find this particular chart anywhere, and I was searching, so if you know where to find it, feel free to send it over. But I find that really hard to believe, because the chart is basically showing upper abdominal region activation was flatline, non-existent, while lower abdominal region activation skyrocketed during posterior pelvic tilt, which is virtually impossible because we're talking about the same muscle group with the same origin and insertion point. You'd expect upper abs activation would be decreased relative to lower abs activation, but chart is literally showing you can engage lower abs through posterior pelvic tilt without any upper abs activation whatsoever. That's impossible. And we already went through this, yes, DMG data showing the difference in activation between different abdominal regions depending on the exercise. The subjects we're doing does exist, but it's only showing the difference in activation, not the difference in hypertrophy between different abdominal regions, because none occurred. That's basically the issue with DMG. Besides the fact it largely depends on electrodes placement on different abdominal regions, it can only measure excitation. And those values it shows are relative values. What I mean by relative values is that it's only showing upper versus lower abs activation during the same lift. But you'll notice that if overall rectus abdominis activation goes up during the particular exercise, that includes both upper and lower abdominal region. They both simultaneously go up or down. I'll try to add a little bit more clarity to this. For example, EMG data is showing lower abdominal region activity is actually higher than upper abdominal region activity during hanging leg raises. But at the same time, that upper abdominal region activity during hang leg raises in absolute terms is actually much higher than upper abdominal region activity during crunches, which is commonly used as an upper abs exercise. You get my point, right? That by itself is an indicator you can't really bias upper from lower abs or vice versa, let alone isolate them. And unfortunately, it's also showing EMG is a limited and flawed way to measure or compare hypertrophy stimulus. Interestingly enough, even researchers conducting those studies came to the conclusion you can't truly bias or isolate different abdominal regions. And in that last study he brought up, the issue is they used MRI to measure and compare the volume between different abdominal regions. And chances are they just retain more glycogen and non-contractile components in that dominant side, the larger side. Increased localized glycogen retention. It's actually a well-studied phenomenon, but there's no conclusive or bulletproof evidence actual contractile tissue increased to a greater extent on that dominant side. Look guys, we know you can't truly isolate upper from lower abs and vice versa, because that's the same muscle group with the same origin and insertion point with the same primary mechanical role. The whole rectus abdominis always engages as a single unit. But if you personally believe you can bias upper from lower abs and vice versa, well, I'm perfectly fine with that. Just keep in mind there's no conclusive evidence for anything of the sort.